Are you trying to figure out what your coins are worth, but you're really struggling with all the random stuff you're seeing online? If you're like most people and you're using the internet to try and price coins, it's a nightmare. You see a coin on eBay that's listed for $3,000. It looks exactly like yours, same date, condition, and everything. You see some guy on YouTube that showed the same coin and one of them sold for $10,000. What's that? You downloaded some app to tell you exactly what your coins are worth, and well, it doesn't even know what your coin is half the time, and then when it does, it gives you this really big range of how much it's worth. If you're struggling with this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to talk about coin pricing. We're going to talk about how to figure out what your coins are worth, and we're actually going to delve a little bit deeper into what anything collectible is worth at all to help us understand more of why coin pricing is really not that easy. We live in a time when almost anything you'd ever want to know is accessible right in the palm of your hand. However, with this much information, there's so much misinformation out there. It seems like for every good resource there is out there about coins, there's a dozen or so that are much less reputable. And it feels like the ones that aren't a really good way to figure out information about coins are the ones you tend to get to the easiest. You see, when people want to figure out what something is, they often think to go to eBay. Or they'll just Google it. Now, when you just Google a coin, usually an eBay listing comes up, and that's usually what people come to first, and they start looking at eBay listings of what people are asking for. This is easy now. You now know what it's worth. You found one that somebody has, and that's what it's obviously worth, right?
No.
You see, the problem is that's a listing that somebody has active for eBay. If it's a buy it now, they can set the price at whatever they want to. That's what they're asking somebody to pay them for that coin. That doesn't represent an actual sale, and if it's sitting there just waiting to be sold, someone hasn't paid the money for that coin for a reason. Let's just look at it this way. If it was really that good of a deal, why is it still sitting on eBay? There is no policing of pricing on eBay. I could take this slick buffalo nickel that you can't even see a date on, and I could put it up for $30,000, $40,000. Is someone going to pay me that much money for that slick buffalo nickel? Probably not, because the coin isn't worth that. Yeah, I know that's kind of begging the question, but it'll make sense in a minute. So eBay buy it nows are not going to be an accurate representation of the actual value of a coin. The way I look at it, whenever all I can find is an eBay buy it now listing to price reference something for, I say, well, that coin is sitting there at this price and it hasn't sold yet, so it's got to be worth less than that. A lot of people will also start to look at price guides. Maybe they're going to use something like Graysheet, which is what dealers use for pricing coins, or they might use something like I have up there, which is the Blue Book, or the Red Book, which I had in my last video. Each of these price guides has its target audience. Graysheet's going to focus on dealers, providing them with a number that helps them to buy. Graysheet also offers a retail number called CPG that you can get even not being a dealer, but it does give you an idea of like a retail number. The Blue Book tries to be like the buying side of the Red Book to kind of give you an idea of kind of that lower value. The Red Book is the other side of it. It's the very high retail number. It's the kind of thing you want to appraise your coins on and hope the insurance company pays out. But notice what I said. I said it's a price guide. I didn't say that's the price. I've had people come in before and they literally hold a Red Book like it's the Bible and tell me that's what the coins are worth.
It is known.
But that's not true, because if I paid them based off those numbers, I would lose immense amounts of money. In the last video, I talked about bulk pricing, and I talked about how a lot of those mid-range coins just never actually pull those numbers. And on top of that, I mentioned that the Red Book is high, and so those two things mixed together just is a recipe for disaster. All these guides, they're built off of something that is the way to tell kind of what a coin is worth. They're built off price history. Supposedly, they're always going off of what someone has actually paid for a coin, whether it be dealers reporting sales or them looking up things from actual reported sales online. Supposedly, they're actually pulling data in to determine what these coins actually should be worth. Now, any dealer who's used Graysheet will know if they're pulling those numbers for some of these things, they're definitely not pulling mine. But Graysheet is a great resource because it's actually updated monthly, which means that the pricing is more relevant to the actual time of the sale. But just because those price guides are representations of sales history does not make them sales history themselves. So what's the actual coin worth then? We can't use price guides to tell us exactly what it's worth. We can't use eBay to tell us what it's worth. The key is actually in what those price guides are using. Actual sales history. Price history is the way that we can get a little bit closer to figuring out what the coin is worth. Now, there will always be outliers for sales history. Some coins will go high, some coins will go low. And so we can't really say this coin sold for this amount, so that's what the coin is worth that I have. But sales history is pretty good for a general idea. But what's to say that the next time there might not be a collector there to buy it at that price? Or you might have that one guy who decides he just has to have this coin, so he'll hit the buy it now option knowing that it's overpriced.
They're buying it!
Which can actually affect more than just that one sale. It can affect price history continuing on if people base their prices off of that. I may or may not have overpaid for an item that doesn't sell very often and accidentally completely change the market on those to go a lot higher than they normally do, and they should. And I'll tell you that story another time. It's kind of interesting. But sales history shows us what the coin is actually worth, and that is what somebody's willing to pay at any given time. That's the actual value of your coin, is what somebody's willing to pay you. And sales history is your best way of determining what that range should be. Now, for some things, there isn't sales history. I collect rare local tokens. I'm actually writing a book on it. And some of these tokens, there's one of them. There's sales history for what tokens should sell for that are kind of rare like that. You can find other ones from other cities. But nonetheless, when you get down to an individual token that you are trying to price, it's ultimately what somebody's willing to pay for it. And on the other side of it, it's what somebody's willing to sell it for, too. As you can see, our shop is in Foley, Alabama. And we have a couple of rare Foley tokens in the shop. Realistically, to a collector, these coins are probably worth $150, $250, somewhere around that range. But am I going to sell them for $250? Heck no, this is Foley. Why am I going to sell a coin that has our city's name on it and its local history for $250? I'll keep it for that. I want a lot more for that coin, even though the market doesn't dictate that. And I've had that happen to me. I've had some tokens that I really want. And although the seller is asking more than I think he should actually be asking for it, I went ahead and either sent an offer and we worked out a deal, or I went ahead and bought it just because it's so rare. Where else am I ever going to find it?
They don't actually exist, do they? In real life.
When you have US coins, though, you're talking about millions made for the most part for a lot of years. Even scarcer stuff where there's thousands or even lower made, you can usually find a little bit of price history. At least a guide, other comparable sales that would help guide you in the direction of figuring out what you should actually expect to get for it and what the coin's probably worth. But this leads us to a question that's really an underlying philosophy in all of this that a lot of people don't recognize. What is anything worth? We're talking about collectibles here. Something that someone values at a specific amount, and the value of that item is what people are willing to value it at. No, I want to know what it's worth. And you say, it's worth what somebody's going to pay you for it. This concept seems foreign to a lot of people when you start explaining it. But what's anything worth? This is a common memorial cent. There's nothing special about it. It's on my desk because I'm too lazy to take it over to the bucket that I normally put it in. It's worth a penny. But why is it worth a penny? And a lot of y'all will just say, well, that's the face value of the coin. It is a cent. And so therefore it's worth a cent. The government has said that is 1/100th of a dollar. And the dollar is our circulating currency for the United States. And everybody acknowledges the dollar is valuable, even around the world. You see, if the government decided to change its currency, it would just be paper and metal. There's nothing about the items themselves that make them valuable. It's the ideas which they represent, which is that wealth and that backing of the federal government for their value. Some people will say we need to get back to gold and silver for that reason, because gold and silver are rare and they're real money. When you get down to it, it's just a metal. Yeah, gold is pretty scarce metal, and people have acknowledged it as something valuable for pretty much human history. And silver's also been long established as a valuable metal, but they're still just metal. We attribute value to it. And if you don't believe that, just watch the stock market for gold and silver spot prices. And like, no, that's not how it works. It's money. Money's money. That's the way it is. But anybody living today will know that inflation is a real thing, and the value of our money changes drastically depending on a lot of different events in our world. Same is true in grocery stores. One grocery store may have cereal for a certain price and the other one might be $1 cheaper. Gas stations. One place is charging $3.79 a gallon, the next place is charging $3.50. What's gas worth? What's the cereal worth? See, all the things I've just mentioned, in fact, everything in the world, doesn't really have a value to it. We attribute value to it based on what we think it's worth. And although the same is true of coins, I often get a lot of people who just don't grasp that. They don't recognize the fact that they'll go shop at Walmart over Publix because they're trying to get a certain item cheaper, but they can't recognize that one buyer is going to pay a certain price for a coin and another buyer is going to pay more or less for it. Yeah, I warned y'all in the last video you'd probably not like my answer, but I really believe when it comes to anything, we attribute value to it. There's not an intrinsic value to it. And we need to recognize that, because if we don't recognize that this is just a chunk of metal, we'll be deluded into thinking that this has a specific value to it. And when we step out of that mentality that there is a set value for a coin, that's when we can actually start to price coins. Now hold up. I don't want you to think that means that if you have a coin that has been selling for $200 and someone offers you $5 for it, that's what it's worth. What I'm saying is, in a sale of an item, we're seeing what the stock market calls market making. And that's what it is in coins as well. It's market making. Someone is actively setting in a price to purchase an item. And so if a price goes low, that doesn't mean every one of those is going to be low, because other people still value their coins highly, and other people who are trying to buy it might value it a little lower, but they still might value it in that other range that it was supposed to be in. So that doesn't mean you should sell your coins low because somebody offers it to you that way. There still is a price range that collectors are willing to pay, and that's what we're actually trying to figure out. We're trying to piece together what that range is at that particular time that a collector is willing to pay to get the item, and also seeing what a person selling the coin is willing to let it go at. Remember, we have to have those two meet somewhere for that to actually take place. It doesn't sell if the buyer and the seller can't come together on a price they think is fair. But just recognize that number is not set in stone. That's the whole point of this. So, how do we find out what the coin's worth? We've already talked about the fact that price history is the way to figure out what people have been willing to pay for it, and that what it's actually going to be valued at is what the person who's going to buy it actually considers it to be worth. So now we get to work those two things together, and we're actually going to look at some resources you can use to help figure that out. As I said, the first resource you can use is one of these book guides. They can be helpful in quickly determining kind of the general idea of what something's worth. Just make sure you understand what that particular guide is built around. And it takes some time, but it's really important to also know its biases of where it overvalues certain things and undervalues others. But that second resource we need to come to apart from that guide is actually going to be eBay. Yeah, I said it, eBay. I already told you eBay was terrible and you can't use any of the information on there, but now I'm telling you can? Well, on eBay, there's actually a feature a lot of people don't know about, and that's the ability to filter by sold items. When you actually look at those sold listings, you can see what people have actually paid for similar items. And when you start to see that your low condition buffalo nickel that eBay has listed for $3,000, that one of them hasn't sold in that condition, but you see a nicer one that's sold for $10, and you see another nicer one that's sold in a PCGS slab for $20, you start to recognize one hasn't sold because there's nobody who's realistically gonna pay a premium to buy that coin on eBay. That's the kind of stuff they can just buy in a pile of buffalo nickels. But when you get into things like mint sets, you can start to see what people are actually paying for those sets. Or if you have a specific coin in a PCGS slab, you can start to see what someone's actually paid for similar items. Now, eBay sold listings is limited, unfortunately. It only goes back 90 days, which brings us to another tool that I use very consistently, and that's WorthPoint, or even another website that's similar, where you can see real auction history dating back for sometimes decades. But I use WorthPoint all the time. It's fantastic. And there are other resources like that too. This is not a paid advertisement. I've never been paid by WorthPoint, but I just really believe in the product and I use it consistently, and I'm a big fan. And when you have that much sales history, you can pick out those outliers, because if eBay only has one item that's sold and it's sold a little bit high, WorthPoint can actually lead you in the right direction to recognize that was an overpriced sale. There's another great resource out there as well that is free, and it actually comes from PCGS. But this one strictly relates to graded coins, so it's going to limit a lot of people if you just have inherited Grandpa's collection. But if you have graded coins, PCGS Coin Facts is a fantastic resource where you not only can learn about the coins you have, research different things about them, see pictures of the coins in different grades, you can also see a price guide, which is going to probably, for the most part, be a little high. Okay, a lot high a lot of times. But they don't just show you a price guide, they show you actual sales history when it's accessible. They will show you coins that have sold at Heritage, Great Collections, Stacks. You can also click a little button that'll show eBay sold auctions. And PCGS isn't just showing you PCGS sold coins. Right below it, you can see NGC graded coins. I love PCGS to begin with. They're a great grading service. No grading service is perfect, but PCGS is pretty darn solid. Now let's go with an example of a coin. Here's one I just got back from grading. This is my own personal one. It's a Graf Zeppelin proof from 1986. Proof 69 decam from PCGS. It's a pretty cool coin. I love the Zeppelin coins from the early 1900s from Germany, and when this one came in the shop, even though it's a later one, I thought, I have to get that. That would go great with my start of a collection, and I think it'd make a good centerpiece. But it's also a coin that is pretty scarce and doesn't get graded a lot. Not to mention this is a PCGS Top Pop, and there's only 2 in this grade and none higher. So it's a little bit difficult to figure out exactly what this coin is going to be worth if I try to sell it, which makes it a great example. So we've got our resources. We've got eBay, WorthPoint, PCGS CoinFacts. Now these aren't the only resources out there, but these are the ones I'm going to be using today because they're ones I actually use pretty consistently. So being a PCGS graded coin, let's start out with PCGS CoinFacts. So when we pull this up, I can see the mintage, I can see that it's silver, it tells me what it is. There is a 68 decam and 2 69 decams. And I can also see that a 68 decam sold in 2022 on eBay for $590. But when I click the show eBay button, it doesn't show me either. So this is where PCGS can be a little bit complicated. Sometimes stuff doesn't quite reference well. So it's always important to look at the actual listing that's sold and see if that actually matches. When I go to that sale, I see that it actually is a PCGS graded coin, this exact one that did in fact sell for $590. Now that was back in 2022, and I've now added to the population of top pops. Might have been when that coin actually was one in grade. So I have to be careful to kind of understand that as well. But I can assume that 590 is a sales record so far. But was it an outlier? That's the question. All right, so I have WorthPoint up, and I see a lot of these raw sell in the like $175 to $200 range. And I do indeed see that $590 sale from 2022. $590 is an oddly round number for an auction, so I think this was actually a buy it now. I don't think this was an auction sales history. But as I go down a little further, I can see that there was an NGC sale about 2 years prior to that. And it was in a 68 Ultra Cameo, the NGC equivalent to Deep Cameo. This particular one sold for $300 a few years before, and that kind of makes sense. The market has gone up, and it is an NGC slab versus a PCGS one. I have 2 68s that have sold so far. That's all the price history I have, and it kind of does look like that might actually be somewhat representative of the price. But dreams are often short-lived. I've changed shirts because it's not the same day, and while editing this video, I realized, oh, I missed a few. There are 2 more sales histories out there for graded ones that I came across, and a lot more recent than the 2 we've already had. And it turns out a 67 did about the equivalent of melt value and a raw coin at 163, but the one that's really uncomfortable is that December 2023 example that's clearly sold at auction on eBay at $188.50, pretty much a little bit over melt, and it was a 69 UCAM from NGC. So we see both of these numbers, they're not round, they're very clearly auction results. So here we see that when this coin goes to auction, we can't seem to find 2 collectors who want to bid it up into those higher value ranges. But occasionally we can find one person that's trying to buy one, and if one's sitting on eBay as a buy it now, they're likely to hit the button at a higher price than what they do auction. But I haven't exhausted my options yet. There's one more I can look at that's kind of going back to what we initially discussed that I told you not to do. You see, I picked a pretty tough one for a reason because I wanted to show that sometimes getting a history and knowing exactly what your coin is worth is a lot more difficult than just saying, this is what the book says. Because the book where this is referenced doesn't have it listed as PCGS Proof 69 DCAM is worth this. It's just going to tell you what the coin's worth as a proof. That last tip I have is actually to go back to eBay and just look at what's available. Well, if there happened to be one of these on eBay right now, then I can get an idea of what's too much. Now, sadly for this coin, there's not one of these specific ones available. In fact, there are only a couple sitting on eBay, and they're both raw, and they're both overpriced in the $200 range. So, for my coin that I just got back, I've hit my dead end. Now I'm going to use a quick example of a much more common coin to help you out in seeing how you can actually come to a better understanding with more common coins. Let's use this 1847 large cent. It's not graded, so we're going to skip PCGS because that's kind of irrelevant. There is one thing you can use PCGS for if you're not familiar with grading. You can pick any different denomination of coin in the particular type, and then you can go to photo grade and see what coins look like in certain grades. The coin we're looking at today is right on the line of VF and XF detail. Details meaning that it's got some problems. It's got some patina that I think is going to be corrosion. I don't think anybody's going to buy this as a problem-free coin. Might not be actual corrosion, but it is some environmental damage to the coin. It shouldn't be green. I pull up the coin on eBay and I'm already seeing prices anywhere from 75, 60, 80, that kind of general price range. But that's what's sitting out there unsold right now. But now I go over to the left and I click on that sold items button and everything changes. I can now see what coins are selling for in these conditions. And the results are rough. We were just looking at prices of $60 to $85. Oh, one of them did 12. Oh, and another one did 27. Now, there's enough sales history for this particular type of coin, we really don't even have to check worth point. There's enough sales. We can get an idea of where this coin's going to fall, and it's going to be somewhere in that $15 to $25 range. Now, generally, when it comes to damaged coins or problem coins where there's a details grade, you generally want to go like a grade down when you're using a pricing guide. So if it's XF details, I'd want to be at VF prices. If it's really messed up, you might want to net that a further couple grades down. This one still looks good. It's just green. It's even got a little bit of luster to it. If I had gone off a price guide like Gray Sheet, which remember is dealer wholesale, I would have valued a wholesale value of $50 for an XF details because that's the bid value on VF. In this instance, this is one of those coins that as a dealer, I know I can't pay anywhere close to Gray Sheet on because I've played the game enough to figure that out the hard way. But somebody who's just using a price guide might not recognize that. They wouldn't know that a mid-grade large cent in a common year that's got some problems to it is not going to do anywhere close to what the price guide tells them it should. We've arrived at a range. It's probably worth somewhere between $15 and $25. So I would say, just telling somebody, I would say it's a $20 coin. Now, what somebody's actually going to pay at an auction, or how long you're going to have it sit on eBay at a higher price to try and sell it, or what a dealer is going to offer you, or what another collector is going to offer you, those things can vary depending on who's looking at it and what they really value it at. So there is a way to get close on understanding what the value is. There's no way to really say this is the value of this coin because it's always going to be in the eye of the beholder. And that brings us back to my coin. We have some price history. We have some general idea of where they sell when they're not in a slab. But what's my coin worth? But we do know what this coin is worth. And that value is whatever collectors are willing to pay me for it. If you're struggling with these things, I'm here to help. From the government, and I'm here to help. I gotta make sure that screen's turned around so you don't see how many tender notifications I have.